Hello, Eleanor Beaton here, and welcome back to another episode of the Woman Owned podcast. Now, I'm sure you've heard the expression, be careful what you wish for, or you just might get it. And when we aren't incredibly intentional about what we want, the results that we want to create, and the process or the experience we want to have while we are creating that thing, us as women leaders and entrepreneurs, especially when we are incredibly capable as leaders and entrepreneurs, will end up building a version of success that we might not actually have intended. In today's episode, I'm going to walk you through two dimensions of ambition: inherited ambition and sophisticated ambition, and why sophisticated ambition should be the goal for any woman entrepreneur who truly wants to create a business that creates optionality, freedom, and enterprise value. Let's get into it. So, several months ago, I was talking to a colleague who is an entrepreneur. So she works inside other people's businesses. And I'd last connected with her a couple of years ago, and she had joined the team of a woman-led business. And she was really excited because she saw this business as a high-growth company where the leader was a visionary who was committed to creating an innovative and new type of business that was sustainable, that was meaningful, and had huge amounts of impact. And so she went into that organization with very high hopes and a real sort of passion for the work that they were going to do, and also being an example of what successful growth could look like in an all-woman team. And when I reconnected with her several months later, she actually had left that job. And she had amazing things to say about the founder. She had lots of great things to say about the company. She was proud to have been a part of it, but she had experienced such high levels of exhaustion and burnout in the quest for growth at all costs that she just couldn't stay there. And she actually felt quite disillusioned that she thought she was joining a culture that was going to be creating a different type of growth model. And it turned out she was stepping into the kind of corporate culture that she actually quit corporate America to get away from in the first place. Now, the reason that I'm sharing this story is not to cast any shade on any woman building a big business. It is hard as hell, okay? And especially if you have investors or you have a board of directors who is really pushing you for certain types of KPIs in order to potentially unlock your next tranche of investment, as an example, it can be incredibly difficult to reconcile the goals that you're responsible for delivering as a CEO with the way that you want to build the business. So I really want to preface what I'm about to share by saying that. But it struck me that so many women go into entrepreneurship, and the primary driver isn't simply that we have a new innovation that we want to bring to the market. It isn't simply that there's a problem that we want to solve or there's a gap that we see in the market. One of the primary drivers behind the massive and decades-long uptick in women-led businesses and the advent and sort of women-led startup culture is the quest for freedom. A couple of years ago, we worked on a project where we interviewed and did research with women founders about why they started the businesses that they started. And to a woman, the reason that they started their companies was for freedom. And in many cases, these women had left corporate America or corporate North America or the corporate world, which felt to them to be extractive, which felt to them to be profit over people and purpose. And they started their own businesses to create and forge a different path. And what they uncovered is that without a high level of intentionality, they actually created smaller versions of the culture and sort of the workplace culture and the hustle culture that they initially wanted to leave. So they got rid of the office, but they didn't get rid of the success metrics. And so they created many versions of the business culture and business practices that they most wanted to get away from. More is better, bigger is better. And what this metric of growth at all costs, this sort of empire mindset created was burnt out founders, depleted teams, overwork, and an overall sort of lack of architecture to support those founders and the teams and increasingly disillusioned teams working with them. And, I can tell that I am talking with a founder who is caught in this trap when she is stuck in this tension where her desire for growth falls into deep conflict with her desire for freedom. So that tension and navigating that tension, the tension between the desire for growth and expansion and the desire for freedom and autonomy and sovereignty, that tension is a very constructive force when you recognize it and deal with it head on. And we're going to talk about why that's so important and how to do it in a minute. But if a founder continues, like stays in that place where they sort of feel paralyzed or they are pushing themselves and they just feel like their growth makes them less and less free, I know that they are in this place where they have recreated a version of success that they often started their business to get away from in the first place. And this is incredibly common. We see it all the time. And it's done by amazing women founders who end up in that place totally unintentionally. And the reason that smart founders end up in that spot unintentionally is that their come from is inherited ambition versus sophisticated ambition. So inherited ambition, or another term I'll sometimes use interchangeably, is empire ambition, is driven by the fundamental belief that more is better, and growth, when it comes to growth, the end always justifies the means. So I'll repeat that. Inherited ambition or empire ambition is the belief that more is better and the ends always justify the means. So inherited ambition is really ambition or a set of metrics that has been sort of absorbed from capitalism, from corporate culture, from startup culture, from entrepreneurial culture, sort of entrepreneurial business culture. And I don't know that I need to explain it much more than that. You've felt it. You have felt that thing. Maybe you've been in a sales situation where you were talking to somebody who wasn't a great fit. There's actually not a truly excellent alignment between what they need or who they are and the work that you're doing. But something comes over you, and it's not just that maybe you need the cash flow, but that you just want to win it. You just want to win the point. That's an example of inherited ambition. It is this sort of base level drive that takes over. And that is very much a version of success and a set of metrics around success that many of us have actually inherited from the culture. And the cost of inherited ambition is exactly what I was talking about before, an increasingly disillusioned and depleted team, a founder who herself is deeply depleted, over toleration, so tolerating being tired, not having boundaries or having no boundaries and calling that flexibility, a workplace culture that drives increasing amounts of productivity, that one win only now sets the new floor for the next win. And so your team and yourself are just under the gun all the time to produce more and better in an ongoing way. And that becomes a version of pressure that is deeply depletive and begins to put your inherent desire for growth as an entrepreneur in conflict with that same desire for freedom and sovereignty that had you start the business in the first place. Sophisticated ambition looks much different. Sophisticated ambition is about alignment with your vision. So, empire ambition or inherited ambition fundamentally asks the question, how do I get bigger? Sophisticated ambition asks, what am I trying to build and how do I true that up? So, with empire ambition or inherited ambition, your fundamental obsession is bigger. With sophisticated ambition, your fundamental obsession is the truthful expression of your vision. And these two things are very different. And if you don't pay attention to them, they're going to lead you down very different paths. Now, I have founder friends whose legitimate sophisticated ambition is an empire ambition. The thing that they love is money and they want more money. Like that is legitimately their value. That's what they want. And I love that for them. That's not shade. Like I actually do love that for them because they have done an honest reckoning of what's important to them. But I would actually say that while I meet very few founders who are not financially motivated and do not have a strong financial motivation. For the majority of women-led businesses I know, that is not the core driving obsession unless by default. So, what I wanted to create this episode around is to really put forth the thesis that the promise of women-led businesses is not to fulfill an empire ambition. The true promise, the true innovation, the true prosperity uplevel and prosperity generation driven by women-led businesses has much more to do with sophisticated ambition. And it is about women founders asking ourselves, what am I trying to build? And how do I wake up each morning and each week and each year inspiring myself and my team to diligently build an organization that is a truthful reflection of this vision. So I want to talk about a few things that you can think about that really open the door to a much more sophisticated and intentional ambition. So the first thing is that you want to really ask yourself, what is my intention and my purpose? This is key and not necessarily your business's purpose, your purpose, because your business will generally be a vehicle that can help you fulfill that purpose. So for instance, for me, my purpose is transforming women's capability into women's actual power. Like everything I do is about this. This is why I don't spend a lot of time doing work on quote unquote on founders. I fundamentally see the women operators in our ecosystem as great. My work and the work of Safi is about how do we translate your capability into power, into capital, into wealth, into optionality, into influence, right? So it's turning women's capability into women's power. That is a deeply personal purpose And everything that I do must be aligned with that. I'm always finding, it's like water's always trying to level itself out. I'm always looking for how can my work do that? And it's been this way for a very, very long time. That's kind of the first thing. So I think really getting clear, what's my purpose? What are your values? Your values are the next, and this is really critical. Like, what are your personal values? And this becomes important. Again, if you are a founder, your company values must be directly anchored in your personal values. Why would you ever build a company that isn't aligned with your personal values? So if a company's personal values, or if a company's values are different from the founder's personal values, that is questionable to me. So for instance, my values are sovereignty/freedom, mastery/high standards/excellence. Those are all three ways to say the same thing in my view. Truth, vitality, and meaningful impact. And so I know that anything that I build, any business that I build must be a reflection of those values. From there, then we're looking at design and architecture. So how does the architecture of your calendar reflect your purpose, reflect that vision? How does the architecture of your team, how does the architecture of your monetization, how does the architecture of your offerings, do you see what I'm saying? How does the architecture of your brand? How are you creating structures in your business that are a reflection of your purpose, of your vision, and of your identity? And are those on lock? These things are upstream of what gets created through sophisticated ambition, which is wealth, spaciousness, and ultimately sustainability. And sustainability is really important to me here. So, for instance, I actually really enjoy working. I work like 40 hours a week, sometimes more. And I have the time to do that. I have tons and tons of energy to do that. I love to do that. For me, the thing that makes it sustainable is the work that I am doing is very closely linked to the vision that I have and to bringing that vision to life through the creation of an organization that can do that. For others, that would be not sustainable for them. I know a lot of you guys who, for you, sustainability is about working 20 hours a week. So there's no one blanket. The thing that makes something sustainable or unsustainable fundamentally has to do with, are you in integrity with your vision for what you want? And I think it's that lack of integrity when people say they want to do business differently, when they say they want to create freedom and they value freedom, and they create businesses and working practices that don't do that. And it's the easiest thing in the world. Like, the gravitational pull of inherited ambition is very strong. And so as a woman leader, as a woman entrepreneur, you need to bring your curation powers, your discernment, and your judgment, and that overall sense of standards and self-possession to truly bring to bear in the culture of your organization so you can create a business that is truly reflective of your vision, in fact, not just in lip service. So I think in conclusion, the next frontier of growth for women-led businesses is not necessarily about growth. Do we want to see businesses more profitable? Do we want to see women wealthier? For sure. But I don't think the frontier for us is growth at all costs. I think that the next frontier for women-led businesses, and the gift that we will give to prosperity, to business culture, to the world of work, is growth that is deeply aligned with and in service of a vision, not growth as a substitute for a vision. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Woman Owned. I'll see you back here next week, and be sure to share this episode with a friend who you think would love to hear it. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode. If you found value in what I shared, please go ahead and like this video, give it a thumbs up, and leave me a review or leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you next week.